The loop road outside Lander, Wyoming, does not announce itself in any dramatic way. It curves through open land, skirting the edge of town before easing into terrain that locals recognize as ordinary. It is a road people use to get somewhere else. It is not a destination. For most of its existence, it has been little more than a quiet stretch of pavement bordered by grass, low brush, and distant slopes that change with the seasons. In the summer of 1997, that road took on a different meaning, not because anything about it changed, but because something ended there without explanation. Lander sits in a part of Wyoming where space dominates daily life. The town is small, the landscape broad, and the distance between places can feel larger than the miles suggest. Roads like the Loop Road are familiar to people who live there. Runners use them. Locals drive them without much thought. They are part of the background rhythm of the area, not something that draws attention on its own. On July 24, 1997, Amy Wroe Bechtel went out during the day, following what appeared to be a normal routine. By the end of that day, she did not come home. There was no confirmed moment when she was seen leaving, no verified account of trouble, no clear break in the ordinary flow of the afternoon. Concern did not arrive all at once. It grew slowly, in the way concern often does when expectation turns into waiting, and waiting turns into absence. The first solid fact that anchored the situation came hours later. In the early hours of July 25th, Amy's white Toyota was found parked along the Loop Road near the Burnt Gulch area. The vehicle was not damaged. It was not concealed. It was unlocked. It sat where it had been left, offering no immediate explanation for why it was there or why its owner was not. That car became the fixed point of the case. Everything else would circle around it. Investigators would return to it. Search teams would use it as a starting location. Timelines would be drawn outward from where it was found. But the car itself did not provide answers. It marked the edge of certainty rather than the beginning of clarity. At the time, there were no confirmed witnesses who could say they saw Amy leave the vehicle. There were no verified sightings placing her elsewhere afterward. The road did not produce signs of disturbance that could be clearly interpreted. The absence was quiet, and that quiet would shape the entire investigation. The setting matters not because it implies danger, but because it reflects normalcy. The Loop Road was not a place people avoided. It was not considered remote in a way that suggested risk by default. It was simply there, part of the everyday geography of Lander. That familiarity made the disappearance harder to explain. When something happens in a place that feels ordinary, it challenges assumptions about predictability and safety. Amy's disappearance did not unfold in public view. There was no alarm raised on the road itself. There was no single dramatic moment captured by witnesses or cameras. Instead, there was a gap in time. She went out and she did not return. That gap is where the mystery began, and it is where it has remained. Law enforcement would later confirm that the case relied heavily on what could be reconstructed after the fact. The absence of eyewitness accounts meant that investigators had to piece together movements based on known habits, reported plans, and the location of the vehicle. That process would define the limits of what could be known. The car, unlocked and undisturbed, suggested a pause rather than a collision or breakdown. But suggestion is not evidence. The vehicle did not confirm whether Amy left it briefly or permanently, willingly or under pressure. It did not indicate direction or intent. It stood still while interpretation moved around it. As the hours passed into days, the Loop Road stopped being just a route. It became a reference point in conversations, reports, and memories. People who drove it afterward knew it differently, not because it had changed, but because it had acquired an association that could not be undone. This case would not be defined by spectacle. It would be defined by restraint. There would be no definitive scene to return to, no confirmed moment of escalation to analyze. Instead, there would be a place where certainty ended, and beyond it, only unanswered questions. The disappearance of Amy Wroe Bechtel did not begin with chaos. It began with quiet. A quiet road, a parked car. A routine that did not complete itself. That quiet would persist, shaping every stage of the investigation that followed. In the years to come, the loop road would be described repeatedly, measured repeatedly, and searched repeatedly. Each time, it would look much the same. Pavement, open land, the steady presence of the surrounding terrain. What changed was not the road, but what it represented. This story starts there, not because it explains what happened, but because it marks the point where explanation stops. Everything known with certainty stands on one side of that location. Everything unknown lies beyond it. The road remains. The car was found. Amy did not return. That is the foundation of the case. Before Amy Wroe Bechtel disappeared, her life followed patterns that were steady, visible, and largely predictable, shaped by routine rather than uncertainty. Amy was 24 years old in 1997 and lived in Lander, Wyoming, a town where daily life tends to unfold at a measured pace. Lander is not large, and for many residents, familiarity with people and places is part of ordinary existence. Amy was known within that environment, not as someone drifting at the edges of her life, but as someone engaged with it, physically and practically. She was a competitive runner. That fact appears consistently in public records and reporting and is central to understanding her routines. Running was not an occasional pastime for her. It was an organized part of her life. Training required planning, discipline, and repetition. Routes were chosen deliberately. Distances mattered. Time mattered. This was an activity that depended on structure rather than impulse. Amy's running often took place on local roads and outdoor routes around Lander. These were not unfamiliar spaces to her. As a runner, she developed a working knowledge of terrain, distance, and conditions. This familiarity is important, not because it implies safety or risk, but because it establishes that her presence in those areas was normal rather than unusual. She was not experimenting with unknown ground. She was operating within a known environment. In 1996, Amy married Steve Bechtel. By 1997, they were living together in Lander. Publicly available information does not indicate instability in her marriage or home life at the time. There are no verified reports of conflict, separation, or plans to leave. Her life appears to have been anchored by ordinary commitments and expectations rather than disruption. Those expectations extended to her daily schedule. People close to Amy described her as reliable. When she planned to be somewhere, she was expected to follow through. When she went out for training or errands, her return was anticipated. That reliability is part of what made her disappearance stand out so sharply. It was not simply that she went missing. It was that she broke a pattern that had been consistent. There is no verified evidence that Amy was preparing for a major change in her life at the time. Investigators did not uncover confirmed plans for travel, relocation, or withdrawal from her routines. Financial records and known communications did not point toward a deliberate attempt to disappear. These absences matter as much as any presence of evidence. They narrow the range of responsible interpretation. Lander itself plays a quiet role in this context. It is a place where outdoor activity is common, where people use nearby roads, trails, and open areas as part of daily life. Amy's identity as a runner fit naturally into that environment. Her routines were not considered risky or unusual by those around her. They were simply part of who she was. The contrast between that normalcy and what followed is central to the case. When someone whose life is marked by routine suddenly fails to return, the absence carries weight. It raises questions not because of dramatic warning signs, but because of their absence. There was no buildup that pointed clearly toward danger. There was no documented moment of distress. The day Amy disappeared did not begin as an exception to her life. It began as another instance of it. Investigators later examined her background carefully for signs that might explain her disappearance. What they found was continuity rather than rupture. She was physically active. She was rooted in her community. She had obligations and relationships that tied her to her life in Lander. These facts did not solve the case, but they framed it. They established that whatever happened did not emerge from a visible unraveling of her circumstances. Her familiarity with local roots also influenced early assumptions. Because Amy knew the area, theories that relied on her becoming disoriented or lost were not immediately convincing without supporting evidence. At the same time, familiarity does not eliminate risk. It simply removes one category of explanation unless evidence suggests otherwise. Investigators were left balancing what was typical for her against what was now missing. The stability of Amy's life also shaped how the community responded. In a small town, people notice when routines break. Her disappearance was not an abstract event. It involved someone who had a defined presence. Someone whose absence was felt not just emotionally, but practically in the disruption of expected patterns. This chapter of the story does not offer clues in the traditional sense. It offers context. It establishes who Amy was before she vanished and what her life looked like when it was intact. That context matters because it limits what can responsibly be claimed later. It reminds listeners that this case is not built on mystery layered over chaos. It is built on mystery interrupting order. When Amy went out on July 24th, she did so as someone who had done similar things many times before. Her life up to that point does not suggest a person standing on the edge of disappearance. It suggests a person moving through familiar routines in a familiar place. That is why her absence remains difficult to explain. It is not just that she is gone. It is that she left behind a life that appeared stable, structured, and ongoing. July 24, 1997, began in Lander, Wyoming, without any clear signal that it would later be marked as the dividing line between what was known and what would remain unanswered. The town moved through the day in its usual way. Lander is not a place defined by constant motion. Its pace is steady, shaped by distance and routine. On that day, Amy Wroe Bechtel followed patterns that were consistent with her life up to that point. She ran errands. She attended to ordinary tasks. There is nothing in the confirmed record that indicates distress, urgency, or deviation from her normal behavior during the earlier part of the day. What investigators know about July 24th comes from reconstruction rather than direct observation. There are no confirmed witnesses who tracked her movements hour by hour. Instead, the timeline is assembled from what she was known to have planned, what she typically did, and what was later found. That distinction matters. This day is defined as much by what cannot be confirmed as by what can. At some point that day, Amy intended to go out near the Loop Road area. Reports indicate she planned to run or scout a route there, an activity consistent with her identity as a competitive runner. This was not unusual for her. The Loop Road and surrounding areas were familiar, part of the landscape she regularly moved through. There is no verified account of anyone seeing her begin that run or route check. The intention is known. The execution is not. After that point, the record grows thin. There are no confirmed sightings placing Amy elsewhere later in the day. No one has come forward with a verified account of encountering her on the road. No evidence places her at another location after she went out. The timeline does not end with a clear event. It fades. As the afternoon moved toward evening, Amy did not return home. That absence did not immediately trigger alarm in the way a sudden crisis might. It created a pause. Waiting replaced expectation. Time continued to pass without explanation. Eventually, concern grew strong enough that family members reached out to authorities. When law enforcement became involved, they were already working backward. There was no active scene to secure in the moment of disappearance. There was only the knowledge that a person who should have returned had not. The most significant development came in the early hours of July 25th, when Amy's white Toyota was located along the Loop Road near the Burnt Gulch area. The discovery of the vehicle provided the first concrete anchor in an otherwise uncertain timeline. Investigators confirmed that the car was unlocked. There was no visible damage reported. It was not hidden or positioned in a way that immediately suggested an accident. The location of the vehicle mattered because it narrowed the field of possibility. It placed Amy at or near that stretch of road at some point on July 24th. Beyond that, it offered no certainty. The car did not indicate how long it had been there. It did not show signs that could be definitively interpreted as struggle or mechanical failure. It did not explain why Amy was no longer with it. No verified witness came forward to say they saw Amy leave the car. There were no confirmed accounts of someone else being present at the scene. The road itself did not provide clear physical answers. It was simply a place where a car had been left. From an investigative perspective, the timeline of July 24th closed at that point. Everything after became interpretation rather than observation. The day began with normal activity and ended with absence. The space between those 2 points could not be filled with certainty. The fact that Amy was familiar with the area complicated early assumptions. Investigators could not rely on the idea that she became lost due to unfamiliarity. At the same time, familiarity does not eliminate risk. It only removes one explanation unless evidence supports it. The timeline did not offer that support. As night passed into morning, the focus shifted from when Amy had last been seen to where she had last been confirmed. The loop road became the center of attention, not because it explained the disappearance, but because it marked the boundary of verified information. What is notable about this day is not the presence of dramatic events, but their absence. There was no recorded confrontation, no confirmed interruption, no documented emergency. The disappearance did not announce itself. It revealed itself slowly, through the accumulation of unanswered questions. In many cases, a timeline narrows toward a moment. In this case, it widens into uncertainty. The further investigators moved away from the last confirmed point, the less solid the ground became. July 24th is remembered not for what happened, but for what failed to happen. Amy did not return. No one saw why. The vehicle, unlocked and undamaged, stands at the center of that uncertainty. It is the last verified object connected to Amy's movements that day. Everything else is inference, constrained by the lack of direct evidence. As the investigation moved forward, July 24th remained fixed as the day everything changed. Not because it contained a known act, but because it marked the end of a known routine. The difference between those 2 states is what defines the case. There is no responsible way to describe what Amy experienced after she went out that day. There is no factual basis for reconstructing her thoughts, actions, or encounters. The record allows only one conclusion about July 24th. At some point during that day, Amy Wroe Bechtel vanished from the confirmed timeline of her life. That vanishing did not occur in a vacuum. It occurred in a familiar place, during a familiar activity, on a day that began like many others. That contrast continues to shape how the case is understood. The day ends not with resolution, but with a parked car on a quiet road and a growing realization that something irreversible had occurred. When Amy Wroe Bechtel was reported missing, the investigation began not from a moment of crisis, but from a realization that time had passed without explanation. The initial response unfolded in a measured way, shaped by uncertainty rather than urgency driven by a known event. Amy had not been seen in distress. There had been no reported accident, no emergency call, no confirmed sighting that demanded an immediate, targeted reaction. Law enforcement was working with absence, not impact. Once authorities were notified, attention centered on the most concrete piece of information available. Amy's white Toyota, found along the loop road near the Burnt Gulch area, became the starting point. Investigators treated the vehicle as both an anchor and a limit. It was the last confirmed physical connection to Amy's movements. Everything else would need to be built outward from there. The area surrounding the loop road presents challenges that are easy to underestimate. It is rural and open, with terrain that transitions quickly from road to undeveloped land. Searches had to account for distance, visibility, and the possibility that evidence, if it existed at all, might be subtle. Search efforts focused on logical paths outward from the vehicle's location, guided by what was known about Amy's habits and the geography itself. Search teams combed the area on foot. They looked for signs that could explain why the car had been left. They examined the immediate surroundings for anything out of place. Public reporting confirms that the vehicle itself showed no visible damage and was unlocked. That fact influenced early assumptions. It did not suggest a collision or mechanical failure. It also did not point clearly toward foul play. It simply stood there, neutral and uninformative. The lack of witnesses immediately complicated the investigation. No one had come forward with a verified account of seeing Amy after she went out on July 24th. There were no confirmed sightings placing her on the road, no reports of a struggle, no accounts of an encounter. Without eyewitness information, investigators had to rely on reconstruction rather than confirmation. Community involvement became part of the response. In a town like Lander, disappearances do not remain abstract. Residents were aware that someone familiar had not returned. People assisted in searches, covering ground and scanning areas that made sense given Amy's routines. The collective effort reflected concern, but it also underscored the limitations of what could be found without clear direction. As the search expanded, investigators considered the environment itself. The terrain was not uniform. It included stretches of open land and areas that were more difficult to access. Each section required time and manpower. The work was methodical rather than dramatic. Searchers were not responding to a known location of harm. They were attempting to locate a person whose last confirmed position was already hours old. At this stage, investigators explored multiple possibilities without committing to conclusions. An accident was considered, not because evidence pointed strongly in that direction, but because it fit the general context of outdoor activity. At the same time, there was no physical confirmation to support that idea. No clothing, equipment, or personal items were recovered during early searches that could explain an accident scenario. Wildlife was also considered in the broadest sense, as it often is in rural disappearances. Again, there was no evidence to support it. No physical indicators were found that could confirm such an event. These considerations remained theoretical, not evidentiary. Voluntary disappearance was another avenue examined, though cautiously. Investigators reviewed Amy's background, her routines, and what was known about her plans. Nothing in the initial findings supported the idea that she intended to leave. There were no confirmed preparations, no communications suggesting departure, and no indications that she wanted to disengage from her life. That theory did not gain traction. Throughout this phase, the investigation remained constrained by the same issue: the absence of new evidence. The searches did not uncover a second location. The vehicle did not yield additional information beyond its presence and condition. Each search operation concluded without changing the known facts of the case. Law enforcement reviewed timelines carefully. They examined when Amy was last known to be active, when concern arose, and when the vehicle was found. These anchors were clear. What lay between them was not. Investigators could not narrow the window of disappearance with precision. The gap remained wide. Technology available at the time reflected the limits of the era. The investigation relied on physical searches, interviews, and record reviews. There was no digital trail that could be followed to refine her movements. The work depended on human observation and inference rather than data-driven tracking. As days passed without progress, the investigation did not end. It shifted. The immediate urgency of locating a missing person gave way to the slower process of reviewing what had already been done and determining what could reasonably be done next. Each decision had to be justified by the facts, not by speculation. The community's awareness of the case grew alongside the investigation. The loop road became more than a location on a map. It was referenced in conversations and reports. People understood that something had gone wrong there, even if no one could say what. Investigators were careful about what they stated publicly. Without evidence, there was little to announce. The absence of dramatic updates did not reflect a lack of effort. It reflected the reality of the situation. There was nothing new to report. This phase of the case established its long-term character. It showed that the disappearance would not be solved quickly. It demonstrated that the available facts were few and resistant to interpretation. It set a pattern that would repeat in the years to come. Periods of activity followed by returns to the same unanswered questions. The initial investigation did not fail in a clear or identifiable way. It exhausted the logical steps available at the time. Searches were conducted. The vehicle was examined. Theories were considered and tested against evidence. What remained was uncertainty. By the end of this stage, investigators had a clearer sense of what they did not have. They did not have witnesses. They did not have a crime scene. They did not have forensic evidence that pointed decisively in one direction. They had a missing person, an abandoned car, and a landscape that offered no easy answers. The loop road continued to mark the boundary of knowledge. Everything before it was documented. Everything after it was unknown. That boundary did not move during the initial investigation, and it would not move easily afterward. This chapter of the case closed not with a conclusion, but with a realization. The disappearance of Amy Wroe Bechtel could not be resolved through immediate action alone. It would require patience, review, and time. Whether time would bring clarity remained an open question. As the initial investigation failed to produce clear answers, attention shifted toward explanations that appeared reasonable on the surface, but ultimately could not be supported by evidence. This phase of the case was not marked by dramatic turns. It unfolded slowly, shaped by the need to test possibilities against what little was known. Investigators were not chasing rumors. They were examining scenarios that commonly arise when someone disappears in a rural, outdoor setting. Each possibility had to be considered carefully, not because it was compelling, but because it could not be ignored without examination. One of the first explanations explored was the possibility of a wilderness accident. Amy had gone out near the loop road with the intention of running or scouting a route. The surrounding terrain includes open land and areas that can quickly become difficult to navigate. From a distance, it was reasonable to ask whether she could have fallen, become injured, or otherwise encountered an accident that prevented her from returning. Search efforts were conducted with that possibility in mind. Teams looked for signs that would support such a scenario. Clothing, personal items, or physical indicators might have suggested an accident. None were found. The searches did not uncover evidence that placed Amy beyond the area where her car was located. As time passed, the absence of any supporting signs made the accident theory less persuasive. Another explanation that required consideration involved wildlife. In rural disappearances, this idea often surfaces early. Investigators examined the possibility because of the environment, not because of specific evidence. Again, no physical indicators supported it. There were no signs that pointed toward an encounter of that kind. Without evidence, the theory remained speculative and was not treated as a conclusion. Voluntary disappearance was also examined. Investigators reviewed Amy's life with this question in mind. They looked for signs of preparation or intent, travel plans, financial irregularities, communications that might suggest a desire to leave. What they found was consistency rather than disruption. Amy's routines, relationships, and obligations did not support the idea that she planned to disappear. There were no verified actions indicating she intended to sever ties with her life in Lander. This theory, like the others, did not collapse because it was disproven in a dramatic way. It simply failed to align with the known facts. Investigators could not responsibly advance it without evidence, and so it remained a possibility without traction. As each explanation was examined and set aside, the investigation returned repeatedly to the same fixed point. Amy's white Toyota, unlocked and undisturbed along the loop road. The car did not confirm any theory. It did not indicate an accident. It did not support voluntary disappearance. It did not show signs that clearly pointed to wildlife involvement. Instead, it stood apart from each explanation, neutral and unresolved. This was the moment when the golden thread of the case shifted. Early on, the vehicle had been treated as a starting point. Now it became a boundary. Investigators began to understand that the car defined the edge of certainty. Everything before it was documented. Everything after it resisted interpretation. That realization shaped how subsequent theories were approached. Without evidence beyond the vehicle, explanations could not move forward. The investigation was not stalled by a lack of effort. It was constrained by the lack of facts that could be tested. Public discussion of the case evolved alongside the investigation. As years passed, certain ideas circulated repeatedly. Each time, they were measured against the same unchanged evidence. Each time, they failed to produce new information. The repetition itself became part of the case's weight. Not because the ideas were careless, but because the facts refused to move. The absence of errors or missed opportunities in the early investigation is notable. There is no verified indication that a critical lead was ignored, or that evidence was mishandled in a way that later became clear. Instead, the investigation appears to have followed the available paths to their ends. The problem was not misdirection. It was limitation. Technology also played a role in shaping what could be ruled out. In 1997, investigators did not have access to the kinds of digital tracking tools that would later become common. There was no electronic record of Amy's movements beyond what could be inferred. As technology advanced, aspects of the case were revisited, but no new confirmable evidence emerged. As false leads were examined and set aside, the emotional impact of that process became more apparent. Each theory carried a temporary sense of direction. Each dismissal returned the case to stillness. For investigators and the community, this cycle was exhausting. Movement followed by return. Possibility followed by absence. The wilderness accident theory faded not because it was disproven conclusively, but because time passed without discovery. The wildlife theory receded for the same reason. The voluntary disappearance theory never gained solid footing. Each explanation diminished quietly, without resolution. What remained was a narrower understanding of the case. Amy disappeared from a familiar area. Her car was found. No evidence explained why. The investigation could no longer expand outward. It could only circle what was already known. This narrowing effect is one of the defining features of the case. As false leads fell away, the mystery did not open, it closed in on itself. The unanswered questions became more precise, not fewer. Investigators did not stop working the case when these leads failed. But they adjusted their expectations. Without new evidence, there would be no sudden clarity. The disappearance would not be solved through elimination alone. The golden thread, the abandoned vehicle, now carried a different weight. It was no longer just where the investigation began. It was where it stalled. The car marked the point where explanation ceased to advance. This chapter of the case is quiet, but important. It shows that the mystery persisted not because of negligence or confusion, but because reasonable explanations did not fit the facts. Each false lead was explored carefully and set aside responsibly. In the absence of resolution, the case moved into a different phase. One defined not by active search for answers, but by waiting for something new to emerge. The false leads had done their work. They had clarified what the case was not. What the case was remained unresolved.
As the initial investigation slowed, the disappearance of Amy Wroe Bechtel entered a different phase, one defined less by active searching and more by time itself. In the months following July 1997, the urgency that had driven early search efforts began to settle into a quieter, more restrained state. This was not because interest faded or concern diminished, but because the available facts had reached their limits. The searches around the loop road and the surrounding terrain had not produced new evidence. The vehicle remained the only fixed point. Without additional information, the investigation could not continue in the same way it had at the beginning. This transition marked the start of the cold case years. Periods of activity were followed by long stretches of stillness. The case did not close, but it no longer moved forward in visible ways. Law enforcement continued to maintain oversight, but without new leads. Progress was measured in review rather than discovery. For Amy's family, the passage of time carried a different weight. Public reporting reflects an ongoing absence rather than resolution. Days turned into months, months into years, without an explanation that could bring clarity or closure. The unanswered questions remained present, shaping daily life in ways that were not always visible from the outside. The community of Lander also changed its relationship with the case over time. In the immediate aftermath, Amy's disappearance was a shared concern. People talked about it openly. The Loop Road was discussed not just as a location, but as a reminder that something unresolved had happened close to home. As years passed, those conversations became less frequent. Not because the case was forgotten, but because uncertainty had become familiar. Anniversaries played a role in keeping the case in public awareness. Media coverage resurfaced periodically, often tied to the passage of time rather than new developments. Each renewal revisited the same core facts. A young runner disappeared. Her car was found. No one knew why. These retellings did not bring answers, but they prevented the case from slipping entirely into obscurity. Investigators revisited the file as technology and methods evolved. However, the nature of the evidence limited what could be gained from re-examination. There was no verified forensic material that could be tested anew. No digital trail existed that could be reanalyzed with modern tools. The absence of these elements meant that advances in technology did not translate into breakthroughs for this case. The years also introduced a gradual shift in how the disappearance was understood. Early on, the focus had been on immediate explanations. As time passed, the reality that Amy had not been found began to carry its own implications. Law enforcement indicated publicly that foul play could not be ruled out. This was not presented as a conclusion, but as an acknowledgement that the lack of evidence supporting other theories left serious possibilities open. Even so, the case did not progress toward resolution. Naming foul play as a possibility did not bring clarity. It simply reframed the unknown. The same limitations remained. No confirmed witnesses. No crime scene beyond the location of the vehicle. No physical evidence that could definitively support one explanation over another. For those working the case, the cold years were defined by review and patience. Files were examined again, timelines were reconsidered, each pass returned to the same boundaries. The car along the loop road still marked the last confirmed point of Amy's movements. Beyond that, there was nothing solid to build upon. The physical environment continued unchanged. The loop road remained in place. The surrounding land passed through seasons as it always had. From the outside, nothing about the landscape reflected the weight it carried. But for those who knew the case, the road had acquired a permanence that extended beyond geography. It was a reminder of a moment frozen in time. The absence of new evidence also shaped public perception. Without updates, speculation sometimes filled the gaps. But speculation did not move the investigation forward. Each theory that surfaced publicly was measured against the same unchanged facts and found wanting. Over time, this repetition reinforced the sense that the case was defined not by complexity, but by scarcity. There were no verified changes in investigative direction that altered the course of the case. No confirmed handoff to a new task force. No announcement of reclassification that came with new evidence. The case persisted in its original state, open but unresolved. The long duration of the disappearance added another layer of difficulty. As years passed, memories faded. Potential witnesses, if any had existed, became harder to identify or locate. The absence of early eyewitness accounts meant there was little to lose in that regard, but time still eroded the possibility of new information emerging organically. For Amy's family, the cold case years were not empty. They were filled with waiting. Waiting for contact, waiting for answers, waiting for a change that did not come. Public accounts describe endurance rather than resolution. The disappearance remained part of their present, not just their past. In Lander, the case settled into the background of community memory. New residents arrived who did not remember the day Amy disappeared. Older residents remembered, but spoke of it less often. The disappearance became something that people knew about, rather than something they discussed daily. Despite this, the case was never officially set aside. It remained open, subject to review if new information surfaced. This distinction matters. The investigation did not end. It entered a state of suspension, defined by readiness rather than action. The lack of a breakthrough during these years reinforced the role of the golden thread. The abandoned white Toyota continued to define the case's boundaries. It was not a clue that advanced the investigation. It was a marker that showed where certainty stopped. As time passed, that role became more pronounced rather than less. In many cold cases, the passage of time eventually brings new perspectives or technologies that unlock old questions. In this case, time deepened the silence. The same facts remained. The same questions persisted. The distance between the two grew longer. This chapter of the story is not dramatic, but it is essential. It shows how the absence of answers can become a constant presence. How a case can remain open without moving. How time itself can become part of the mystery rather than a solution to it. By the end of the cold case years, one reality had become clear. Whatever happened to Amy Wroe Bechtel had not left behind the kind of evidence that yields easily to investigation. The disappearance was not unresolved because it was ignored. It was unresolved because it resisted resolution. The loop road still stood where it always had. The car had long since been removed, but its significance remained. The boundary it represented had not shifted, time had passed, but the case had not moved beyond that point. This was the state in which the case entered its later years. Open, quiet, unanswered.
By the time the case entered its later years, the question facing investigators was no longer how quickly answers could be found, but whether answers were still possible at all. Without a breakthrough, the investigation settled into a narrower examination of theories. These were not new ideas. They were the same possibilities considered earlier, revisited with the understanding that time had changed what could be known. Evidence had not grown, it had aged. The task was no longer to discover something fresh, but to test whether the existing facts could support any conclusion more firmly than before. The first reality investigators acknowledged was that an accidental explanation had grown less likely with time. The absence of physical evidence became more significant rather than less. Years had passed without recovery of clothing, personal items, or remains in the areas most logically connected to Amy's disappearance. While the environment around the Loop Road is expansive, it is not untouched. Searches had been conducted. People continued to travel through the area. The lack of discovery did not absolutely rule out an accident, but it made it increasingly difficult to support. The same applied to wildlife-related explanations. Investigators had never found evidence supporting such an event, and time did not add any. The theory remained technically possible, but practically unsupported. As with the accident scenario, it faded not because it was disproven, but because nothing ever emerged to reinforce it. Voluntary disappearance was revisited periodically, often prompted by public speculation rather than investigative findings. Each time, the same conclusions held. Amy's background, routines, and commitments did not align with a planned disappearance. There were no confirmed financial movements, no travel indicators, and no communication suggesting intent. Time did not reveal hidden preparation. It simply extended the absence. As these explanations lost strength, the investigation increasingly acknowledged the possibility of foul play. This shift did not come with a specific piece of evidence that demanded reevaluation. It came from process of elimination. When reasonable non-criminal explanations failed to align with the facts, investigators had to consider that something more deliberate may have occurred. This acknowledgement was careful and restrained. Law enforcement did not announce a conclusion. They stated only that foul play could not be ruled out. That distinction mattered. It preserved investigative neutrality while recognizing the limitations of other theories. Within this context, certain individuals were publicly discussed as persons of interest over the years. This included Amy's husband, Steve Bechtel, and later Dale Wayne Eaton. These discussions occurred in the public record, but no charges were filed against either individual in connection with Amy's disappearance. The investigation did not advance to a point where evidence supported formal accusation. The presence of named persons of interest did not resolve the case. It underscored its difficulty. Investigators were clear that suspicion alone was not evidence. Without corroboration, theories involving specific individuals could not move forward. Throughout this phase, the golden thread of the case remained unchanged. Amy's white Toyota, found unlocked along the Loop Road, continued to define the investigation's limits. The vehicle did not point clearly toward any theory. It did not establish when Amy left it. It did not indicate whether another person was involved. It did not provide forensic answers that could be tested as technology improved. In many cases, time allows evidence to speak differently. In this case, time emphasized silence. The car did not gain meaning as years passed. It remained what it had always been, a fact without context. Investigators revisited timelines again and again. They examined when Amy was last known to be active, when concern arose, when the vehicle was found. These anchors were firm. The space between them remained unresolved. No witness emerged to fill that gap. No document surfaced to narrow it. The theories, therefore, existed within a constrained frame. Whatever happened occurred after Amy went out on July 24th, and before her car was found early the next day. Beyond that, the investigation could not responsibly say more. This narrowing of possibility is central to understanding the case. Theories did not proliferate endlessly. They collapsed inward. The longer the case went unsolved, the more clearly defined its boundaries became. Instead of expanding, the mystery tightened. The role of the golden thread shifted again during this period. Earlier, it had marked where knowledge ended. Now, it also marked where interpretation failed. The car was not just the last known object. It was the limit of what could be reasoned from evidence. Law enforcement acknowledged this openly. Public statements emphasized that the case remained open and that new information could change its course. But they also reflected the reality that without such information, the investigation could not advance on theory alone. For the family, this stage of the case carried a particular weight. Public reporting reflects continued advocacy and hope, but also the burden of prolonged uncertainty. The lack of resolution did not fade with time. It became part of the case's structure. The community of Lander continued to carry the disappearance as part of its history. The loop road did not change, but its association with the case remained. People understood that a disappearance had occurred there that had never been explained. That understanding persisted even as details blurred with time. Investigators remained constrained by the same factors that had shaped the case from the beginning. No confirmed witnesses, no crime scene beyond the vehicle's location, no forensic evidence that could be definitively tied to an event. Theories could be discussed, but not confirmed. This chapter of the case does not provide answers, it provides context. It shows how an investigation can move forward intellectually without moving forward factually. It shows how possibilities can be weighed carefully without tipping toward resolution. The absence of a breakthrough is itself a form of information. It indicates that whatever occurred did not leave behind evidence that was easily discoverable. Whether that points to deliberate concealment or simply unfortunate circumstance remains unknown. By this stage, investigators and the public alike understood that the case might never be solved without new evidence. Theories could clarify what was unlikely. They could not establish what was true. The golden thread remained unresolved. The white Toyota still defined the boundary between knowledge and speculation. Nothing had emerged to move that boundary outward. This is where the investigation stood in its later years, acknowledging the possibility of foul play without proof, revisiting familiar theories without new findings, holding open the space for answers that had not yet arrived. The case did not end here, it remained open. But it reached a point where the limits of theory were fully exposed. Without evidence, explanation could not progress. What happened to Amy Wroe Bechtel remained unanswered, not because investigators stopped looking, but because the facts did not allow them to say more. The final chapter of this case does not begin with an answer. It begins with the quiet recognition that some questions remain where they are, unchanged by time. By the years that followed Amy Wroe Bechtel's disappearance, the facts had settled into a fixed shape. They did not evolve. They did not expand. They remained as they were first established. A young woman went out near the Loop Road on July 24, 1997. She did not return. Her white Toyota was found the following day, unlocked, undamaged, and alone. Nothing verifiable emerged after that point to explain what happened. This stillness is not dramatic, but it is heavy. It is the weight carried by unresolved cases, where the absence of information becomes a presence of its own. For investigators, the end state of the case is defined by responsibility rather than conclusion. The file remains open. It is reviewed when appropriate. It is ready if new information appears. But it cannot be forced forward. Law enforcement can preserve evidence. It can respond to tips. It can revisit known facts. What it cannot do is invent answers to fill silence. That restraint matters. It reflects respect for truth rather than comfort. The temptation to offer certainty where none exists is strong, especially after decades. But in this case, certainty would be dishonest. The golden thread of the story remains unchanged to the end. The abandoned white Toyota along the Loop Road is still the boundary of knowledge. It is the last verified object connected to Amy's movements. It marks the place where certainty stops and speculation begins. That boundary has never moved. What makes this case linger is not complexity. It is simplicity paired with absence. There are no tangled timelines, no conflicting witness accounts, no competing forensic interpretations. There's only a short list of facts and a wide space between them. That space has shaped the experience of everyone connected to the case. For Amy's family, the disappearance did not resolve into memory, it remained active. Public records describe endurance rather than closure. Years passed without explanation, but the absence did not fade. It became part of daily life, carried forward without relief. For the community of Lander, the case became part of local history. People remembered that a runner vanished from a familiar road. New residents learned the story in fragments. Older residents remembered it more clearly, even as details softened with time. The Loop Road continued to exist as a place people drove through, but its association with the disappearance never fully dissolved. The road itself did not change. The land around it remained rural and open. Seasons passed over it again and again. Snow came and went. Summer returned. Nothing in the environment marked the absence of resolution. Only people carried that knowledge. In many true crime stories, the final chapter delivers revelation, a confession, a discovery, a breakthrough that reorders everything that came before. This case offers none of that. Its ending is defined by honesty rather than revelation. Investigators have been clear about what they do not know. They cannot say when Amy left her car. They cannot say whether another person was involved. They cannot say whether her disappearance was accidental or deliberate. They can only say what the evidence allows and what it does not. That clarity about limits is itself meaningful. It demonstrates the difference between mystery and fiction. Fiction demands resolution. Reality does not. The selected narrative angles of this case come into focus here. Vanishing point, the silent evidence. Amy did not leave behind a trail that spoke. The evidence that exists does not point outward. It points inward, toward its own insufficiency. The silence is not empty. It is structured. It is defined by what was searched and not found, by what was examined and did not yield answers, by what was reconsidered and remained unchanged. The passage of time did not erode the facts. It preserved them in place. Each anniversary returned the same questions without modification. Each media revisit restated the same timeline. Each new audience encountered the same ending. There's a particular discomfort in that repetition. Humans expect progress. We expect stories to move. When they do not, we feel unsettled. This case resists that expectation. What happened to Amy Wroe Bechtel remains unknown. That statement has been true since July 1997, and it remains true now. It has not been weakened by time. It has been reinforced by it. The absence of resolution does not mean the absence of meaning. The case serves as a reminder of how fragile certainty can be, how quickly routine can give way to disappearance, how little evidence an event can leave behind. It also serves as a reminder of restraint, of the importance of saying only what can be supported, of allowing uncertainty to remain visible rather than covering it with speculation. The final image of this case is not dramatic. It is a quiet one, a rural road, a car that once stood there, a life interrupted without explanation, a community that remembers, investigators who remain open to answers that have not yet arrived. There is no final theory presented here, no implied solution, no suggestion that the truth is obvious if viewed from the right angle. The facts do not support that. Instead, the case closes as it has always existed, open, unresolved, defined by a boundary that has not moved, The loop road remains a place on a map. Amy's name remains in records. The case remains active in principle, even as time stretches forward. What lies beyond the known facts remains unknown. This is not a failure of storytelling. It is an accurate reflection of reality. Some stories do not end. They pause,